Now, this is a topic I'm really excited to talk about. Nowadays we speak a lot about cultural wars, and then we talk a lot about culture being a political element to advance in a certain political position. And this is actually not something new whatsoever. You saw it now in the US, for example, with silly debates like, for example, the Mr. Potato Head can be gender neutral or not. But here in Europe, you saw it as an institution. Culture was understood from the beginning as something that could emphasize the model of Western democracy. And this came about after the war, mainly as a tool to emphasize the Western countries have a very good model of democracy, and the culture of the West is very happy. Here we sing, here we're happy. And in the East, they're actually living in boring, sad communism, which created this narrative of separation between the two models, and then emphasize on the attractiveness of one model, basically with the power of a song.
Volare, oh, cantare, oh, nel blu dipinto di blu, felice di stare lassù.
Eurovision is a European institution, and actually, if you think about it, Eurovision was created even before we created the political institutions that we have today in Europe. Eurovision was created in 1956, and it was actually founded by the same countries that signed 1 year later the Treaty of Rome that created the European Economic Community that later on became into the European Union. So actually it was the same partners that joined and then say, let's create these amazing political institutions. But then 1 year before they created Eurovision, there was obviously one partner that was extra, and that was Switzerland. But then we know that actually Switzerland has been a country that was not joining the political institutions of Europe at the time. Yet it is very interesting because if you think about it, if you have the same engineers prioritize first on creating the cultural element of this narrative, and then the symbolic element of the narrative of how beautiful democracy is, and then they prioritize that over the political factors that were going to be the base for later on what we have today as the European Union. But then Eurovision was doomed to be political from the beginning, actually, because if we start thinking about Eurovision as a tool of power, then it was obvious that someone was going to start taking advantage of that power, right? So I think it was in 1968 when actually Eurovision suffered its first political attack, in the sense that it was heavily politicized. Franco, which was the dictator of Spain by the time, understood the power of media and understood the power of Eurovision to actually create a tool of propaganda of his regime, and then to bring people to Spain. So what he started doing was not only he actually took away the song from the original singer, who was a Catalan singer, but the thing with Franco is that he started to buy several programs and several shows from other broadcasters across Europe in exchange of votes. And in that year, with a song that for many people is not memorable, for me it is very memorable, Spain won with a song that was called La La La, and in 68, it was 68 La 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 in that song, and then that brought the victory to Spain and a victory for Franco's propaganda machine. The second blow of very political things that happened in the Eurovision was in 1974. Now, in 1974, everybody remembers that year because obviously ABBA won the competition. But the most interesting thing that happened in that year was the political aspect of the runner-up of Italy. Italy brought up a song that it was called "Sì." By the time of the broadcasting of the contest, there was going to be a referendum in Italy to actually outlaw or not the divorce institution in Italy. At the end, by the way, the divorce as an institution was not outlawed in Italy, so "Sì" and its censorship didn't matter that much, but actually talks a lot about the fear of national broadcasters and the national governments to actually understand the power of media when it comes to influencing the political thinking of a whole nation.
Sì, la mia mente disse sì, per paura, per amore, non me lo chiesi mai.
The third thing that happened with Eurovision that was very, very controversial on the political level was in 1993 when the Bosnian war happened and when the siege of Sarajevo happened by Serbian troops. And it's very sad to think actually that Eurovision was a more supportive institution and a place to voice out the problems of the Bosnian war, and then Eurovision as a phenomenon actually reacted faster than many of the leaders who could have actually helped alleviating the humanitarian situation that was actually happening in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Sva bol svijeta jednočas u Bosni ostaje da bol uprkosi.
It was not only the West, and it was not only autocrats like Franco, it was not only national governments like the Italian one in 1974 that saw Eurovision as a powerful tool of media influence. The East understood that very, very well, and the Soviet Union leadership understood not only that this was a threat because of the cultural element that attracted many times people to say how beautiful is Western democracy, and you see that through songs, but then they knew that this was actually an element that could permeate the mere fabric of the Eastern culture and of the communist system. Because even when in the 60s and 70s there were not many families and then there were not many households who had a TV, on the radio the signal of the European Broadcasting Union was actually being heard in the countries that were in the border of the Iron Curtain. Think about it this way. In 1957, Austria joined the competition, and if you talk with people from Western Hungary who were under communist regime, they could receive the signal of the EBU from the border, and then they could hear the contest in the radio as they were children. So it's actually very interesting because the Soviet Union understood that this will eventually influence the people who were behind the Iron Curtain that they physically put on.
He didn't know my feet were made for dancing. Oh, rockin' baby. Come on, feel the sound, rockin' baby. Hardly touch the ground, rockin' baby. 'Cause our feet were made to dance. Oh.
And this becomes super relevant when actually we break the wall, and in 2001 Estonia wins the Eurovision Song Contest. When Estonia won, the first thing that was done was actually to take the victory politically. And the Prime Minister of Estonia, actually the first thing that said was, now that we have won Eurovision, we freed ourselves from the Soviet Empire, and actually we are singing our way into Europe and not to the other parts of our past. It is very symbolic because that shows you the understanding of those countries who were under Soviet domination and their willingness and eagerness to actually win the competition, to prove the political point that they belong to Europe and not to the East, where they saw their past and the pain that they had. I think that if we put aside all these issues of the cultural power that Eurovision has to actually influence politics, it is very important to see and to highlight that yes, Eurovision has a huge cultural element that highlights the progressive thinking that we have as a continent and that highlights the value of our Western democracies. With this said, I don't think that the war on culture is the same as it was at the beginning of the competition in the 50s or in the 60s. There is no more Cold War, but there are still systems of oppression. And that's why I support that more countries join the Eurovision. That's why I support that Kazakhstan maybe joins the competition. Not because I do believe that our system might be better than the one in Kazakhstan, but then it's actually because I do think that it's only positive that at least our point of view, it is visible in systems where oppression is the rule, and then where diversity, freedoms are highlighted, and then probably those are the basis for actually people to get engaged and then to fight for democracy and then to get politically active in those systems of oppression. And then that could only be possible if we allow this to happen with the help of institutions like the Eurovision.